All right, welcome back to the Prospecting Show. Today is Wednesday, September 1st. We're finally in the back half of the year here, back quarter of the year. Today we got David Liggitt on the call. How are you?
Doing well. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing great. We're actually just chatting before the show here about where you guys are based out of and some of the real estate. You have a cool background here. We're going to talk about Data Center Hawk today a little bit more in detail, but give us your background first. Tell us about who you are, kind of what you've done. We were talking a little bit about some real estate and some of the different, projects you've worked on. So give us the 4-in-1 on who you are.
You bet. So again, thank you for letting me be on the show. I'm excited to be with you and your listeners. So my name is David Liggitt. I'm the founder and CEO of Data Center Hawk. We are an online platform for the data center industry to get information to make the best decisions possible. So, my background, I grew up in Texas. I went to school at Baylor University, reigning national champions in basketball, which I just have to throw that in there. I'm not sure how much longer we'll have the Baylor cloud, because the Big 12 is blowing up and all that stuff. But anyway, went to Baylor. I've had 3 jobs out of college. One, I actually worked right out of school for a sports camp with kids. So I spent 5 years, my wife and I, 5 years of our life, investing in kids ages 13 to 18 years old. And we love that experience. I've always been an entrepreneur at heart. And so then we moved back to Texas and I started working with a real estate company, a commercial real estate company called CBRE. So they're, I think now probably a Fortune 200 company, maybe. We're certainly big when I was there and are bigger today, but they're a global real estate company. When I got there, I immediately jumped into the data center space and spent time learning that business. And then 7 or 8 years later began Data Center Hawk, and that's where we are today. So that's been my professional background. I'm actually, I always tell people it's unique in the sense that I spent 5 years working with kids. I spent 8 years in like a Fortune 200 in corporate America, and I've spent the last 7 in a startup. So very different experiences, but they have all been great for me because I have loved getting to see different parts of just business. And it's funny, even in those 3 things I just mentioned, there's so many, even though they're very different, there's so many similarities and like things I've learned just about the business world and people and how to serve others that has resonated in each one of those areas.
I think it's important too to have that diversification too, because like we talk a lot about it on the show with entrepreneurs, and most people are very for education, but are very against school, right? It's like, I went to school for 4-year undergraduate in Canada, 5-year doctorate in the US, right? I've done a little bit of school. You've done a little bit of school. Like, it's one of those things that I haven't met anyone yet that's like, hey, I attribute all my success to school, right? It's always like, I attribute it all to the experience, right? Either the jobs I worked or the people I met or the problems I solved or the company I built or whatever the thing is. And for you, like you said, you've already you did the kid thing, you did the corporate thing, now you got the startup thing. And that's like, most people would love to have that diversification in their life and they just can't get there, right? Because it's not easy to do that many different things. So walk us through a little bit, of what you guys do. Like give us kind of the service, the offer, how you guys work with people.
Yeah, right on. So basically when I started in the data center industry back in 2007, that world was very hard to understand, meaning it was almost an invisible world that companies were spending hundreds of millions of dollars investing in, but they didn't always have great information to make those decisions. So while I was at CBRE, I certainly recognized, and we were helping companies do this, but we felt that pain too, because this was just a world that traditionally was undermarketed. There wasn't good information. Making decisions on like an apples to apples basis was really hard. So back in 2014, we started our company Data Center Hawk with the desire to have like a platform, a subscription-based platform that companies, data center owners, investors, consultants, vendors, users could go and get information to help their decision-making process better. So for those that are like outside of the data center space, what I typically tell them is we are like a Zillow for data centers. And a data center is a building, a physical building that holds servers for a company's applications, a company's website, a company's HR, like whatever the company uses those servers for to support their digital infrastructure. That is what that does. And so we track all the building data. We track how big the market is, how much vacancy is in the market. So if you're in the commercial real estate space and you're thinking about the office or industrial or multifamily space, all those metrics that are tracked for that, we track just on the data center side of things. And so we've done that now for the last 7 years. We have different products that we've built that help people with what it is they might need to understand. It's been awesome. I mean, we've learned a lot. Anytime you start a business, if there's people, I'm not sure, Connor, like the makeup of your audience, but I would imagine there's people that have either started a business or might be thinking about starting a business. And I would say, one thing that I've learned through my experience has been some of my initial thoughts around where the market was and what we would want to do were like right on. Like I can say, man, I thought this would be true, and it was. And we have customers that are paying us because what I thought was going to happen happened. On the flip side, I would say there were things that I guessed and thought of that were 100% wrong.
Yeah.
And so once you go through that experience, you look back into something to do it. And that was a risk I was willing to take. And I'm so excited. I mean, our team is here in Dallas. We have team members that work for us internationally as well. This is a global market, and it's been a blast.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about the use cases. Cause I'm sure there's people like you have this data play, but then you also have like different use cases on the commercial side, the industrial side. Like give us an example of like a problem somebody has and then how you guys actually solve that.
100%. Yeah. So let's say you are a publicly traded data center owner, and you have 200 data centers across the world. You have money that you're going to spend to expand your facilities. You need to grow in a market. So like a Dallas or Chicago or Phoenix or Northern Virginia, and you're trying to understand where to grow. You need market data metrics to match the reason why you believe you need to build another $250 million data center in Chicago. So, typically if you're going to make a decision with that type of capital expense, you really need to have a business case to support it. And so our data flows into those business cases, right? These are like the people that use our data are very smart, high-level executives that are making decisions with a lot of money. And a lot of times they already know what the decision is and should be, but they need the data to back that up. And then a lot of times too, our data tells them maybe a different story than they originally thought. So they go, wait a minute, we thought we were going to put the 250 million over here. Let's move it over here. And so that's a great example. Another one is for investors. So a lot of our customers are companies that are actually investing in different data center real estate acquisitions. And so they're trying to understand, hey, I'm going to go buy a data center facility, which is typically very expensive. I need information to help me make the best decision. That's another, right down the fairway use case for us of our customers today.
Yeah. And I think that part's really important too, to look at from a capital investment standpoint, right? Because people are going to typically invest in something that has a risk tolerance that they're happy with, right? And it seems like for you guys, you're really like maybe I'm simplifying it, but like you're a risk management company at the core, because basically you're telling people like, here's all the data to be able to make the best decisions possible so you can mitigate your risk, but also get the right buy, get the right opportunity, right? So when you work with these companies, do you ever find people like get the data, look at the data, and then they still make a decision that doesn't necessarily support the data? Have you ever had that?
Yeah, sometimes. I mean, I think, there's companies that certainly are going to do what they want to do, regardless of what the data, regardless of what the data tells them. And I don't fault them for that. Where I think that companies have been very careful is going like, hey, we need to back up when we're, the data center industry, as I mentioned, is so capital intensive that you've got to back up those decisions with, a business case that supports the decision-making. And so, and a lot of times third-party data, we don't care if the data center market in Chicago, London, Singapore, or Phoenix grows by 10% or 5%. I mean, we want the industry to do well, but we're not biased in trying to tell a story that would promote certain business cases. We're just trying to tell the accurate story. And that's where we try to really differentiate ourselves from other groups. But I think that, from a risk perspective, I mean, you mentioned that as it relates to our company, but I would say the data center real estate asset class, when compared to the office, industrial, multifamily, retail, has really been a shining star in the last 12 to 18 months. Given the pandemic and what's been going on, obviously, offices have looked differently. And so, but we've seen a lot of investors, open their eyes to this market. And I think we'll continue to, because, I always challenge people, tell me a company that's not depending or wanting to depend more on technology today or in the future. And all that technology dependence typically resides in digital infrastructure. And that digital infrastructure typically resides in a building, a data center. So technology is getting better. There's efficiency being gained as it relates to densities and things like that. But the way we use data is growing exponentially, and that directly benefits the data center space.
Yeah, and I think your point is valid too, that you see a lot of these companies that everyone's been remote for the last 24 months now, or pretty close to it. They're relying heavily on the ability to have their data stored, right? So the data center market's going to go up, and then the opposite's kind of true too. These commercial spaces are probably going to go down because people are like, listen, Ernst & Young doesn't need their $1 million a month floor anymore inside some tower, right? They don't need to.
Yeah, the pandemic has forced a lot of digital transformation. So companies that maybe traditionally like would have never gotten there, the pandemic forced them to do it. If they wanted to survive, if they wanted their company to keep meeting, they had to learn how to do it online, and they had to learn how to do it from their homes. And so while painful, it also created maybe opportunities for other markets, other companies to benefit off of, the new world that we live in today. And I think most people would agree it does feel different today than it, was 12 months ago, or even obviously 2 years ago. And so I think that those type of changes have impacted our industry. And it's one of the reasons, like when I decided to get into this space back in 2007, I couldn't directly predict what would happen, but I did, have the like intuitive belief that this market's going to continue to grow, and show me how it won't. And I can't find that use case where like, well, maybe this happens and it stops, or maybe this, because of the way that our use of data has changed and our dependence on data, it's a market that we've been really excited to be in, and we're really excited for the future too.
You give us the rundown of the people that you would want to call out to, right? So there's like the investors on the commercial industrial kind of data center technology side. There's also like these businesses that rely on data. Like who's the ideal customer for you? And then how can they actually reach out to you guys and start that conversation of like, hey, how can you help them?
Right. The best thing I always tell people is like, our website is datacenterhawk.com. And you can go there, so if you are a company that needs that is making a strategic data center infrastructure decision, you have 30 servers, or I'm sorry, 30 racks of IT gear in your owned space, and you're trying to figure out, what do I do with this in the future? Because we have a refresh of the hardware. So we're going to have to go spend $2-3 million of that, or we're going to have to outsource this somewhere else. You can come to our website and actually find and evaluate like the physical locations where that would go. So that's one just use case. That's every company. Some prefer to use cloud resources, so Amazon or Google or Microsoft, whatever those might be. Some prefer to do it in what's called a co-location facility, where you can actually take those physical racks and servers out of your own space and put it in someone else's, and not have to deal with the operational stuff. And so that we have a search tool. You can see that. If you're a data center owner or an investor, someone that's thinking of the space in that way, even a consultant that's trying to understand the market, we have a tool called Hawk Insight. So every quarter, every 3 months, we produce basically market overviews, market reports on, I think now it's like 40 markets across the United States, Canada, Europe, and Asia, where we'd say, hey, let us show you how the data center market in Frankfurt, Germany has grown over the last 3 months. Let us show you how things in Hong Kong have changed, over a 12-month period. And that has to do with how big is the market? How much vacancy is there? How much absorption or how much demand has gone on in that market over a period of time? And so all that data is like on our platform. So those interested either customers or prospects for us can log in, go to our website, see that data, and then make the decisions they need to make from there, or utilize that data to help inform their understanding what the market is.
Yeah. So for those of you who are like looking at investing and kind of making that shift into tech, right? I think there's a lot of stuff in the crypto space right now, and there's this big general transition to technology. If you want to see that insight tool, right, that's going to be datacenterhawk.com/insight/overview. You can get to it right from the products page. Just pulling that up right now on the screen. Go check that out, because I think that's going to be able to show you the future opportunities within the marketplace. And it seems like it's not just in the US, right? There's some opportunities throughout the whole world that have this data center kind of play. And so if you're interested, you're like I said, investor, maybe you're looking at the real estate space, maybe you want to just buy in, maybe you just want to get more education on the space, definitely check that out. If they wanted to reach out to you, is the best way through the website?
Yeah. We've made it pretty simple on the website. You can just go, there's a contact form, just reach out to us through that. And we have team members that respond very quickly. So, obviously if there's ways that we can help, let us know. You mentioned regarding not just in the US, I would tell you that what we're seeing in Europe and Asia over the next 3 to 5 years is going to be a dramatic shift and an acceleration of infrastructure needed to support the population sizes over there and the business maturity that's taking place, a lot that we've seen in the US over the last couple of years. So 2020 was one of the largest growth periods in the US data center industry ever. And I think typically we're 2 to 3 years ahead. The trends in the US are typically 2 to 3 years ahead of where they will be in some other markets. And so I would just say Europe is fascinating to watch the growth that's happening there. What's happening in Asia, that's fascinating as well. So those are areas certainly to keep your eye on. And obviously what's taking place and what's happening in the US is pretty robust too.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, for those of you who are listening to this, David Liggitt from datacenterhawk.com, check that out. There's a bunch of different resources there. I think there's going to be a lot of up and coming stuff. And like you're saying, like that worldwide kind of growth in the next 2 to 3 years is probably going to be where a lot of money is made and where a lot of new companies and new services and new products are launched. So thank you so much for coming on the Prospecting Show. We're going to drop all the links below for those of you who are listening on Anchor, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, whatever you're listening on. Thank you so much for coming on the Prospecting Show, and have a great rest of the day.
You bet. Thanks, Connor.